Well, joining me now is Legislative Councilman Michael Tien. He's been a member of several pro-Beijing political parties in Hong Kong. He quit to start his own conservative party called Roundtable. He's also one of Hong Kong's representatives in China's National People's Congress. Good to have you on the program, sir. Do you believe that some of the protesters, at least, crossed a line by storming and vandalizing the legislature?
Absolutely. I think there are two groups of people last night. A smaller group is the one who are very skillful, know how to break heavy glass windows, pry open roller shutters to allow the rest of the people in, and then they subsequently disappear. Then the rest of the youngsters that followed in, I believe, are very zealous youth with a passion, trying to express their frustration on how their voices have not been heard by government, nor have LegCo been able to look after their interests and address their concern. That's why they picked LegCo.
I see. Would you accept then that just because a bunch of anarchists managed to breach a barrier and cause some chaos, that doesn't take away from the fact that a lot of these young people have very legitimate concerns?
Any action violating the law needs to be followed up and, if required, prosecuted. Otherwise, we are sending a very, very bad signal to the whole world and to our younger generation, is that the rule of law in Hong Kong has gone astray. On the other hand, we need to also understand what exactly are behind the frustration of these young people whom, when they enter the building, realize that they may get arrested, thrown into jail, and they still risk it. What is it that gave them this, how should I say it, determination to challenge the establishment? It is something that we need to find out. It's a conflict of a much higher order. And I believe, as I mentioned, their loss of trust in the government and in LegCo for representing them under the one country, two system, the fact that it seems to be, to them at least, the impression is leaning more towards one country than two system, and somehow they worry that the balance will be increasingly tipped.
They worry that the balance will be tipped because of the proposed extradition law, which has been put on the back burner for now. Isn't it a good idea to just scrap it? Because we've seen all the trouble. Even suspending it has not been enough for the majority of Hong Kong's people, because the numbers on the streets were massive.
Absolutely. This extradition bill, with government continue to push it through LegCo amidst massive turnout in the number of protesters on the first Sunday, I think it's a trigger point of people increasingly believing that one country, two system and a high degree of autonomy is eroding. However, they are now asking for a complete retraction of the bill. I have said openly, a retraction of the bill is meaningless, because even the current Chief Executive, Carrie Lam, can bring it back any time during the last 2-3 years of her tenure. What is more important to me is government's pledge that if and when they ever bring it back, it will be involving a proposal that has mainstream public support. Because I also feel that both the government and the Central People's Government, who came out in support of Hong Kong as our government, in their original direction, is to put a stop to Hong Kong continue to be a haven for criminals committing offenses overseas and then coming back to Hong Kong and get away scot-free. Even in the 1997 early records of LegCo meetings, even the pan-Democrats have stated that they are in support of looking into how to make mutually acceptable arrangement
Understood.
along this line.
But for many of the protesters, and this is a very educated public, this is one of the successes of Hong Kong, they know that a proposed bill or a law is never going to say we're going to send dissidents to China to disappear forever. That might happen folded in under a different law which says we want to fight crime and we want to fight human trafficking and we want to fight bad guys. And by the way, an added bonus is if Beijing requests somebody who's a political dissident, they can be sent over under that law. Don't you understand that from the perspective of the protesters?
I do not believe that that represents the majority view of those who went on the marches.
What is
I
their
believe
view?
the majority went on the march because the government keep pushing for a bill that has not been reasonable, with Taiwan already saying that they do not want to accept this fugitive, of Hong Kong people expressing their worry about the judicial system in China, and government refuses my proposal, which is to have Hong Kong court trying Hong Kong permanent residents committing offenses overseas to try them locally,
Yes.
which has met with very high popular acceptance, and government has turned all these proposals down. So they are furious as to why they push forward a bill that has no sound basis, more than them worrying that themselves be extradited to the mainland for actions that they take in Hong Kong. Everybody knows it's an extradition agreement. It's not cross-border arrest.
Understood. I'm intrigued to try to understand if there's any pressure from the Chinese right now, especially individually. You would have spoken to people in Beijing. It's a crisis. Even though, if we watch Chinese state-run media to the rest of the world, they're just celebrating 22 years of the handover. You wouldn't even know something's happening in Hong Kong. But digging a little deeper, some state-run media saying there should be zero tolerance. We've heard the liaison office say the situation is totally intolerable. You're an important man and you have the ear of important people, and people on the mainland will undoubtedly be speaking to you. Are they putting pressure on people such as yourself for the administration in Hong Kong to crack down mercilessly on the protesters?
The answer is a categorical no. Who called a stop to this bill? Is it really Carrie Lam, who destroyed her old self, having declared at 11 p.m. on the first Sunday that she would go ahead? I don't think so. I think the central government has a huge role to play in calling off this bill. So let the facts speak for itself. The central government is a people's government. They can crack down on political dissent, they can crack down on corruption, but when they go against the people, they are very, very careful and they are very rational. A few thousand are minority, mobsters, people with their own self-interest, yes, they would have no mercy, but not common, normal, middle-class, grassroots, families bring their kids peacefully marching on the street who pick up litter during the whole march and rally.
How much would Beijing want to just intervene?
Okay, so my point is that
certainly. How much?
My point is that
okay,
they call off this because they realize.
Go ahead.
They called this off when they realized that they have been misinformed about the degree of opposition of Hong Kong people against this bill.
What should Carrie Lam do now?
What should Carrie Lam do? Well, without question, two things that she must do. She is completely crippled in terms of introducing any politically sensitive, controversial bill in her remaining the years of her term. Secondly, the one thing she must make all her effort in is connecting with the youth of Hong Kong. I have openly pleaded today for her to use the long summer to hold a series of large-scale, closed-door, not in front of the media, closed-door town hall meetings, just listening sessions. Listening to young people, listening to the common people, what is it that they are concerned about in terms of their current frustration and the future direction of Hong Kong. And hopefully, when she has heard enough individual comments, okay, which obviously has to be carefully, how should I say it, organized to prevent any kind of mishap during these listening sessions, so that they can piece together and crystallize 2 or 3 or 4 major concerns of the citizens at large in Hong Kong about one country, two system, where we are now, and then what is it that they want to see in the longer term. Is constitutional reform a key part of their concern? Because that will give them a say in who becomes chief executive, and also the legislature in terms of impartially representing all views and playing its monitoring role, providing check and balance against the government.
Michael Tien, really good to have you on the Newsmakers. I thank you for taking the time. Well, let's broaden out the discussion now. Edward Chin was a leader of Hong Kong's Occupy Central movement and is now the convener of 2047 HK Monitor, a group that says it's striving for true democracy. And Emily Lau is a former member of Hong Kong's Legislative Council and used to be chairwoman of the Democratic Party. Good to have you both on the program. Emily Lau, are you surprised that things took such a turn to such levels of violence?
Well, I don't know. I guess these young people, they feel very desperate and very disillusioned and very angry. And of course, I never support violence, but I hope the international community would understand their sense of frustration. And of course, I call on Carrie Lam, the chief executive of Hong Kong, to come out and respond to all these demands. Demands not just made by the young people, but by many other Hong Kong people.
Edward, do you believe that Carrie Lam has not been listening?
I don't think she is listening much. And to be honest, I'm with the business community. And, you know, they turned this extradition bill into something that's totally out of proportion. I don't know what, you know, like it's like turning Hong Kong into a platform where everyone is trying to calculate what Beijing wants to do. Is there something even behind a much, you know, like some sort of a conspiracy? Now, to answer your question, I think the kids, you know, and I do talk to some of them. They are like the teenagers to maybe university age. They feel very desperate. They don't think the government is listening. So if push comes to shove, they just want to give it all. And some of them are even suicidal. So I think the government needs to address this seriously.
Emily, by storming the legislature, have they harmed their chances at being heard?
Well, I hope not. And I have been trying to tell the international community and urge them to understand the sentiment of these youngsters, and also to understand that the vast majority of the Hong Kong people are protesters, but they are peaceful and orderly protesters. And our demands are very reasonable. So I certainly hope Beijing will not have a harsh crackdown on Hong Kong. This is Hong Kong. It's not Tiananmen Square. And I certainly hope Carrie Lam will come out and engage the public in discussion.
Emily, Chinese state media is calling for zero tolerance. Does that worry you?
Well, of course, it's very bad. I just received a message from the president of the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. And he knows his students very well. And he's calling for calm and saying that we should come out and engage, talk to each other directly, and not just keep repeating statements and not just going to see, where people should be arrested and charged. And I hope the presidents of other Hong Kong universities will look at what this president has said and also come out and counsel the government to be more sympathetic and understanding.
Is the government going to be sympathetic and understanding, Edward?
I really can't tell, but definitely I think this is beyond the extradition bill, and I think only Carrie Lam, if she is brave enough to tell the international community, is there a bigger conspiracy behind this? Because I honestly think that this has nothing to do with the murder case. And then the students and also some adults as well, they are being pushed to the corner. Now, a lot of money, they have already left Hong Kong and moved their assets, liquid assets, to Singapore. And why is that? There's the one country, two systems is not intact because of this evil bill that she tries to implement together with her cabinet. So this is something quite serious. And then we have to calm the storm. But most important thing is she has to be very honest to Hong Kong people and also to the international community. Why does she create all this mess? Is it herself, just herself, or is there a bigger scheme, a bigger conspiracy behind?
When you say that, Edward,
like hosting a press conference.
Certainly, Edward, when you say a bigger scheme and you're asking questions about whether this is just herself, are you suggesting maybe that this was a manufactured crisis in order to bring about a Chinese crackdown? Help me understand fully what you're saying.
I take a look at what happened 30 years ago. We had the Tiananmen crackdown. 60 years ago, we had the Tibetan uprising. Now, I don't think Beijing would seriously give us 50 years of so-called one country, two systems. And then they try to use whatever excuse it is. And then we have seen, from 5 years ago during the umbrella movement, at first, what people were asking for was the Deng Xiaoping model, which is you could still criticize Beijing, you could still criticize the CCP, they call, you could still have a horse racing and then you could still have dancing, right? But then now, 5 years after the umbrella movement, they are creating this one evil bill, which is if landing Hong Kong is equal to like landing China. Of course, they are putting it to a halt, meaning a pause, and it's like playing a DVD player. They can replay the thing again. So it's like watching a horror movie, like Aliens. The creature can just come out again and attack everyone. And that includes the business community.
Emily Lau, do you share those sentiments that there's something deeper at play here where perhaps Beijing is itching for a confrontation in order to do something about it?
Well, I don't know. I don't have the evidence. What I have been saying for quite some time is that Carrie Lam made this big blunder because of the Taiwan homicide case, and she wanted to solve it. And she also thought it would be convenient to solve the problem of rendition, which Hong Kong has been negotiating with the mainland for 20-odd years and got nowhere. So she thought she was very clever, and she came up with this. And of course, it's blown up in her face. So what about the other things? I don't know. Maybe it's true, but we respect the rule of law. So if there's evidence, let's hear it.
Yeah, so Edward, if Carrie Lam decides to eject the DVD, it's not on pause. She scraps the bill completely. She takes the DVD out, she breaks it, she throws it away. Have we reached a point where people will accept that and go home? Or have we reached the point of no return?
Well, I hope she would use the word like a retract from the bill, and she hasn't. And right now, is she like a buying time, or is it that she has received the blessing from Beijing? She still got 3 more years to go. That's something we don't know. What I know is like at the 4 a.m. Hong Kong time, she hosts this press conference. Now, is it also like just to follow the what I call UK, like evening news, and then broadcast to the US as well. Just to capture the prime time, morning and evening news. I don't know, but if like she is honest and if she is upfront to Hong Kong people and to the international community, I wish she could do some sort of like a town hall meeting, talk with the business community, talk with the students. And she is playing more like a Beijing person now. Just, like keep her ears, like eyes blind, ears shut. So this is not good.
Right. And we heard the same from Michael Tien, who's close to her, suggesting the same thing, having a listening period where Carrie Lam can listen to the people. Let me ask you, Emily Lau, over the years, in 22 years, is this the biggest test of Hong Kong's autonomy and the biggest test of one country, two systems?
You mean what happened to it in the last 22 years?
Is this the biggest test that we've seen over the past 22 years?
Yeah, it is a big test. And of course, the attempt to pass the Article 23 legislation on national security in 2003 was also a big test. And so it is very bad. But of course, this time we have 1 to 2 million people marching, which is, of course, tremendous. And so I certainly hope it will wake everybody up. So we should always be vigilant about safeguarding our rights. And we hope that the Hong Kong government and Beijing will listen carefully and not to try to erode our freedoms and personal safety.
Edward Chin, do you want Carrie Lam to resign?
I personally do, because like if you work in a proprietary trading firm or an investment bank, if a CEO of a company is underperformed, and this is really underperforming because it scared the heck out of a lot of people, from all sectors, from all social background. We definitely want her resignation. And if you were in the business world, then she would be fired like a long time ago, 2 weeks ago.
Very finally, Emily Lau, do you want the same? You want Carrie Lam to step down?
Yeah, of course. Although some people will say, what's the point? If she's gone, then Beijing will pick another puppet. But I think the message must go out. If someone makes such a huge blunder, the person has to go.
Okay, it's been great to talk to both of you. I thank you very much for joining us on the Newsmakers, Edward Chin and Emily Lau.